competition, whatever it may be, if it's for a milkshake or if it's for a couple $100 or whatever it may be, it's going to bring out what you got in you, whether it's great or it's bad, and you can hopefully see what you need to work on.
This is The Tournament Code.
We appreciate you taking the time to join us, Josh. We know where you are now. You're playing on Corn Ferry some. You've played on the PGA Tour some. You got a really cool story. Before we get through all your story, let's really start from the beginning. How'd you get into the game of golf?
Well, first off, thanks for having me as well. I'm glad to join you guys. At first, I would say, didn't have any interest in golf. I was more into basketball and baseball, and my mom, she was dating who is now my stepdad, and he was a golfer, and she kind of started, and I just didn't enjoy watching it when they would watch it on the weekends. I had no clue what it meant, like the scoring, just wasn't interesting at all. Good time for a nap, actually. But I would say around age 11, I kind of got interested just from like being out at Greenbrier and overlooking the range there from the pool. I'm like, I think I could do that. Like I could hit a ball. It took at least a year before I could convince them to get me some clubs because it might mess up your baseball or whatever it may be. And then I think my 12th birthday, I got a set. And it was kind of a combination of playing with my mom and my stepdad and also a handful of friends that I'd gone to elementary school with. And then kind of through middle school, I went to Morton and they went to Tates Creek, but I knew they were still playing. And a guy in Harrodsburg across the street from my dad would play, and then another kid, and it was just kind of a combination of all that that really got me started.
That is cool. You got your first set when you were 12. When did you start playing tournaments and figure out, hey, like I might want to play this a little bit more competitively?
Yeah, it wasn't too much longer after that, I would say. They used to have champions for juniors out at Kearney Hill, like to wrap up the summer. And it was just a 9-hole event. And see, a good friend of mine, Mac Jarbo, had been playing. His mom and dad were golfers and kind of invited me to come out and play this little 9-hole event. And I probably shot, 65 or something, 70 on 9 holes. But that kind of was my first event, I would say. And then the next summer, I probably signed up and played some Pepsi Junior Tour, maybe 4 or 5 times across the state. And then, kind of got wind of the Larry Gilbert Bonnell interclub matches. And that was probably the first place that I really like competed and got my head knocked in a few times. And I guess thought I wanted to continue at it.
So I think, it's a really interesting story how you ended up at Morehead State. You played college golf at Morehead State, and I'll just let you tell the story. How did you end up at Morehead State, and what were kind of the steps that got you there?
As I said, I played baseball through high school and was better at baseball at that point. Played with some guys that got drafted into the, professionals, and one of them was a 32nd pick in the draft my senior year. And, we had a lot of, I guess, scouts and people looking at talent coming to our baseball games. And I remember one, I told him I was playing golf in college, and he's like, why would you do that, But, I wasn't a power hitter. I wasn't anything that I thought would go very far in the baseball world. So I had a high school teammate at Henry Clay, Alan Foster, who actually is no longer with us, sad to say, but he was a great player. And I remember in 8th grade, we tried out for the golf team at Henry Clay, and he made it. I didn't. And he got to leave early out of the 6th period or whatever it was to go to practice that fall. And I kind of shook my head every time. So that was another kind of thing to, I guess, spark my interest and get me going. Well, fast forward to the end of high school, we're playing a high school event. I think George Rogers Clark was hosting at Eagle Trace in Morehead, and Coach Cheney was there to watch Allen, and he was our number 1 guy. I was our number 2 guy, and I don't know. I played pretty good that day, and it just caught his eye. Alan maybe didn't play his best round, but he ended up going to Morehead as well. Stayed about a year, but I wrote it out. And I also knew some guys from Harrison County, a guy named Kevin Letcher and John Hatfield, and some Winchester guys who we had played interclub with in high school against that were going to Morehead. And I don't know, I just liked those guys, and you know, Coach Cheney would give anybody a chance. So as long as you had some clubs and some balls, you could go try out. And I went up and met with him during Christmas break of my senior year at Henry Clay, and decided, hey, this is where I'm going to go chase it.
Well, he gave you more than just a chance in the sense that you got up there and it took a little while, but you developed as a golfer. From what you're kind of telling us, it sounds like, high school, like you wanted to be good. You were pretty solid, but you weren't obviously the golfer that you are today. Tell us a little bit what it was like getting to college, playing against that competition, and kind of your roadmap through college.
Yeah, I think, even at Henry Clay, I was until my junior year, I didn't make the team to, go to the regionals or even the matches around town. It was my junior year when I did, and I was still like the fourth or fifth man. So I think, I've benefited maybe from not being the best on my team and being challenged and, you know, always having to fight to try to climb the ladder a little bit, which, we're still doing today. It started that way at Morehead. My first semester in the fall, I didn't qualify for a tournament. There were some thoughts like, am I doing the right thing or whatever it may be? And spring break trip that spring, he took me as an individual and I played okay. And we had a guy that didn't play great, and we were actually playing two tournaments that trip. And the second trip, I got put in the lineup, and luckily, pretty much stayed in there from then on.
So it sounds like, you were getting better every year, and you guys did win the OVC championship, and I think it was your senior year, but did you ever, have thoughts of, I'm going to play on the PGA Tour, or when did that kind of thought kind of start to emerge?
Yeah, I mean, it was my sophomore year that we won. I was like the three man on the team, and Nick Atzinger had come in as a freshman and played as our fifth man and played really good at the conference. And our upperclassmen played great. Ben Hensley, Kevin Childers, Scott Bennett. We knocked them off down there in Nashville, so that was a fun time. I think it was the year before the automatic bid went in, so we didn't get to go to regionals, but we got some memories from it. Your other questions, when did I think about playing the PGA Tour? I think, you know, from the time as I was a little kid, I wanted to be an athlete. I wanted to play something. And growing up here in Lexington, hey, let's be a Kentucky basketball player. Well, that dream ended pretty soon, when I didn't make the high school team. And then baseball kind of panned out. It panned out for a while through high school. But, I think when I chose to go with golf in college is kind of when I was thinking, like, let's try to make a career out of this.
That makes sense. And in college, you had some success, and then you decided to go pro when you graduated, I think in 2001. What did you expect, like, success to look like when you went pro immediately?
Yeah, I mean, I think in my mind, like, I knew how it kind of worked, how the system worked. If you get through first and second stage at that time and get to final stage, and you can now got some status, what was on the nationwide tour, buy.com at that point. And I felt like if I could get there, it wasn't like today where you can get there and not get any starts. You were going to get some starts. And I thought, well, I think I can do that pretty handily, pretty easily. I played in a couple U.S. amateurs, a couple Western amateurs, and done okay. But, I didn't make it through that first year. I think it was maybe my third event after turning pro, Kentucky Open being the first one. But, it didn't happen. I didn't get through the first stage that year. And, 7 tries later, I did get through first and second stage. I had this thought in my mind of what it was going to be like, and it was far different.
It's easy to look back now on those 7 years that, you were going to Q school every year, playing mini tours, I'm sure, when you could, and say, this is all worth it. I played on the PGA Tour, made a lot of money, made a great career out of it. But during those 7 years, were there times that, you questioned whether or not this is the career path for me, or, just talk about what those 7 years were like.
Yeah, for sure, Cooper. I mean, you go through something that you think, you've got a pretty good handle on, and you just can't get through the barriers that are in front of you. There's always some doubts and questions. Like, I was thankfully, fortunate enough to have, sponsors and backers that from here in Lexington, and also other places that I'd, kind of come across that helped me through those times, which made it, easier to get by and to keep pressing forward, which was very helpful. But I think the question that I always ask myself is, are you playing your best? Are you maximizing what you can do? And if that's the case, then, let's do something else. But I always felt like there was something else that was there that I could, accomplish, or something, I could do. I'd seen myself play better. I just needed to do it more often.
What were the areas that you felt like you improved on and you added to your game that helped it grow?
Yeah, I think, I'm pretty hard on myself, number one, and, you know, realizing that I didn't have to be perfect, still realizing that today. Each club in the bag's made for a reason, You got a 60 degree because you're going to miss greens and you're going to be in bunkers and you're going to be short-sighted. So, you know, more accepting of that. I've had times like when I've been, I think, better at that than I have been at other times, especially in those first, 6 or 7 years. And, I got to working with Matt Killen in 2008 down in Bowling Green, and he really helped me to realize that, like, I was really good ball striker. I just needed to putt a little bit better and be more consistent on that front. And he really got control of my ball, I think, a little bit better at that time. Kind of had realized how to play, and you don't want to go at every pin and all that stuff that we talk about these days. But and then to really get control of your ball and know that, I think that's what really broke through and gave me the breakthrough in '08, '09, and you know, still going today.
Yeah, so you start working with Matt Killen in '08, and then you get through Q school that fall, and then that first full season on the Corn Ferry Tour you win, and then the first full season on the PGA
Hmm.
Tour you finish around the 75th and the money list. So I mean, you really just took off from there. What was it like just to
Hmm.
finally break through?
Yeah, I mean, it was great. It was a lot of fun, traveling around to places I'd never been, seeing. I mean, on the Corn Ferry that year, we went to Australia and New Zealand, like kind of right out of the gate. And I'm like, who knew I'd ever be here? And actually played pretty good over there. So, and then once you get to playing, I think, as y'all know, like, confidence, breeds itself. If you're playing well, like, it's actually a lot easier, than it is when you're struggling and you don't know what's coming that day, and you're like struggling to get to the course. I think Byron Nelson has a book talks about that. When you're playing well and you're confident, like, your showers you shower faster, you get out of bed quicker, you do everything, you drive to the course, and you're just in a flow that you just hope it doesn't stop. So we're always searching for that.
I get that. And in 2008, you said you started working with Matt Killen and really helped your game a lot. What kind of insights were you getting that helped you improve? And then, as far as we kind of talked about how that next couple of years went, tell us a little bit more about how those next years went and what had ended up happening.
Yeah, so with Matt, he got me to where I think I'm more of like a visual learner or feel oriented. So putting sticks in the ground and, like, missing it on the backswing and missing it on the downswing on the opposite side, and having a stick alignment stick for your ball start line and things like that. I think I'd never really done a whole lot of that at that point, and it was just eye opening to see, if I do this with the face, like, this ball is going to start to the right, and I just don't want it to, you know, curve too much to the left. Kenny Perry being a great example to look at. But I just would go to tournaments, and I had a really good friend caddying for me who I'd played many tours with, and I felt like we were having fun and, enjoying the challenge of traveling, number one, number two, seeing new courses that we'd never seen before, putting in our work, ahead of time. And sometimes that was him putting in the work and me resting. And to this day, like, I think as you get older, 44 almost now, you know, that rest key is very important. I need to start doing that a little bit more and and lean on somebody that's with me to maybe scout out the course and only play 9 holes one day. And if I don't feel good in the middle of a stretch, like take a day off. I feel like I listened to Billy Tom on here, and he was talking about that in his first year or two out, and just kind of going with the flow, playing 11 in a row. Like I've done it many times, and maybe did it last year, but just not smart.
It's hard to know when to stop, and it's hard to gauge a lot of times, like, because you get every event, you never know when you're going to play well. We were just talking with the guy who's like, yeah, I mean, you make most of your money over 6 to 8 week span. You don't know when that span is, but it can be
Hmm.
tough to feel like, hey, if I take off this time, this could have been the time I was playing good. So before we get to things that you're doing now and trying to play out there, you were out on mini tours from 2001, 2008. Then you got that nationwide status at the time. And then all of a sudden, you finished seventh on the money list in 2010. You're on the PGA Tour. What was that jump like for you?
The buffer year there on the Corn Ferry or Buy.com was huge. I couldn't imagine going straight from mini tours to the big tour. And I had met Kenny Perry and knew JB Holmes a little bit when I went out there because of them working with Matt Killen as well. So I think that was a great buffer, and they kind of took me under their wing to kind of, I guess, guide me along out there at times. And I also graduated from Corn Ferry with a guy named Blake Adams, who I played a lot with. We stayed a lot together, played practice rounds and things like that. I think were very helpful. And knowing now about the reshuffle, didn't really know exactly what all that meant when I got out there. But finishing fifth at Pebble Beach in about the fifth tournament or whatever it might have been, was huge because it set up my whole year. Knowing maybe what I know now, if I went in and knew I had to do that to set up a year, have 3 or 4 good events on the West Coast, could have been tougher. So
Yeah.
sometimes what you don't know is actually a blessing.
Yeah. I mean, you talk about finishing top 5 at Pebble Beach, and I believe in 2013, you finished T2 at Torrey Pines to Tiger. What is it about those California
Yeah,
tournaments, those West Coast tournaments that you like so much?
that's a good question. Torrey Pines, especially, is a ball striker's course. Long, rough, pretty narrow fairways on the south course. And the Poa annua greens, I think we can get some Poa annua greens here in Kentucky in the spring, here coming up now to the next 3 to 4 months. So a lot of times I kind of would revert back and think, hey, I've putted on stuff like this before. And I think that maybe was a little bit of an advantage, as crazy as that may sound for somebody that doesn't spend much time here in Kentucky. But I think that was helpful. It's always great to be in beautiful destinations, which is also another bonus. But yeah, that's only 2 things I've got.
When it came to getting out there, as you said, you secured your card for the rest of the year and stayed out there for a while. What did you learn from your rookie season that you carried over to your next year?
I think mostly just being around and seeing the golf courses and knowing that ones that favored me, ones that didn't. If you haven't won though, and you're coming back for a second year, you're guaranteed a lot more starts, and you know where those may be, but you still have to perform. So I wouldn't say that you can pick your schedule 100%, but if you played a course the first time around and you just didn't like it, you can kind of axe that off your schedule for the next year. But I would say that's the main thing for sure. that and the logistics of each tournament, like where to stay. You maybe stayed in the wrong place, or LA is an example. Like I didn't play that my rookie year. I got into it my second year. But if you can stay 5 miles away, and it can take you an hour and a half, 2 hours to get there if you go at the wrong time. So you got to know where to stay in order to eliminate that problem. And there's other tournaments that are maybe not that extreme, but things of that nature.
As you got going, one of the things that a lot of times people look at is like overnight successes, it seems like. And as we noted with your story, 7 years on the mini tour, then nationwide, then PGA Tour. What was the different feel for you going through that, knowing you spent all that time there? And people might only see like, oh, he played on the nationwide, now he's on PGA Tour. This is awesome. But I know it takes a lot to get there, as we've discussed. So what was the different feel for you stepping onto the PGA Tour, playing there, and not only just having the resources, which is nice, but also the pressure that comes along with that potentially?
Golf's a game where you put in work as long as you pretty much are working on the right kind of things. I think it pays off. You can play golf like Cooper and I did at Morehead State, or you can play at Vanderbilt, who's I think maybe the number one team in the country right now. But as long as you're playing and competing, and you're going to get better. And I think the fact that I was competing for those 7 years and then popped right out there on the nationwide and had success, it was just more confident. More confidence came from that, and trust in my game and belief that, I did it here. Why can't I do it here? And to come out my first year and do well, I'm like, let's just keep going. Like there's better things we can do. My goals weren't just to keep my card. Maybe the first year it was, but after that it was like, let's win. Like let's try to get as high in the world rankings as we can. And to this day, like I'm still trying. I'm wanting to grind it out. I want to get back. I want to do more than get back to the tour. I still think I can win. So I think just competing, whether it's those 7 years on the mini tours or a guy that gets straight on the tour, like competition, in my opinion, in anything is very good.
That's a really, really tough mindset to have, but that's definitely the right mindset to have for someone who's trying to make it to the PGA Tour. One of our really good friends, Ashton Van Horn, once he recently got his Corn Ferry status, he was able to move down to Jacksonville and play at TPC Sawgrass. And he talked to me and Daniel a lot about how just being around a lot of really good players has helped him progress, and just like having that daily competition to where they push each other every single day. And I want to talk about something that you did in your career. Is at some point, I'm not sure when in your career, you decided to move down to Sea Island. Just talk about kind of why you made that decision and how it helped you to live down there.
Yeah, that was we kind of decided that in 2014. So I'd been married for almost a year, had our first child coming, and we had spent a couple winters in Scottsdale. So we were in Kentucky for most of the year, and then Scottsdale for a few months in the winter. And it just never felt like we were home because we were on the tour traveling or we were in Scottsdale. So we wanted a place that we could kind of call home and the weather be good throughout the year. And, Sea Island's a pretty special place. Not too far from here in Lexington. And we knew a lot of people there that were on tour that were living there. So it just seemed like a perfect fit for kind of the small town feel and to have the weather and to be in a vacation destination, to be honest. So we moved there in 15 when our oldest Bane was, I guess he was just over a year old. And it was great. I got to compete with guys like Jonathan Bird and younger guys, even like Keith Mitchell, who's now having a lot of success, and, Grayson Sigg and Joey Garber and I played a lot. Zach Johnson at times, Hudson Swafford, we played quite a bit, Patton Kazire. So, I could keep naming them, but every day you could find a game if you wanted one. And, I'm more of a guy that would love to go play 27 or 36 holes than I would beat balls for 4 or 5 hours. So it's just that same thing I said a minute ago, like competition, whatever it may be, if it's for a milkshake or if it's for a couple $100 or whatever it may be, it's gonna bring out what you got in you, whether it's great or it's bad, and you can hopefully see what you need to work on.
Absolutely. One of the things that we talk about is, when guys you get a bunch of good guys together, you learn things from each other. And so, what are some of the things that you learned from playing with that group, and what's one of the things you think they learned from playing with you?
It's a good question. Well, I think, I learned from playing with them is like, even though, I'm older than most of those guys I mentioned down there, they had a lot of success earlier than I had. And I just think because you're, say, more of a veteran player, that doesn't mean you can't learn from younger guys. Some guy might be a great chipper. I mean, there's a guy who lives down there named Mookie DeMoss, who's played at Georgia, who I've become pretty good friends with. And he's kind of in that, I guess, stage I was in where he's had some scoring fairy status, but not very great, and had some injuries. But I mean, he's a really good short game guy. His chipping is unbelievable. And I went down there this winter and spent 3 or 4 days, stayed with him, and we just practiced every day. And I tried to learn from him through that. And then, I'd hope, through me, just they could see, I don't know, just how I approach. I'd say driver's my best club. Like, I don't get too bent out of shape over it. I just kind of see a target and I swing, and I feel like I'm gonna hit it where I'm looking most of the time, and I don't put that much pressure on it. And hopefully that's something that, like, I've helped those guys with, or you know even um, balancing family life a little bit.
Yeah, so that's kind of what I wanted to talk about next is, when you first came out on tour, you were what was considered a bomber. You would you would hit it over 300 yards down the middle pretty much every time, and that was your strength. Like, you killed the golf ball off the tee, and you had wedges into greens. But now on the Corn Ferry Tour, you're a little bit older, and comparatively to the rest of the field, you're not hitting it quite as far. So, like, how has your approach changed on just competing and using what strengths you have to compete?
I think I'm gonna jump to a different point in my career, but I lost my card in 15, and I think when I left, I would say I was probably top third in distance. And then I got my card back after 18, and I went back, and I was probably right at average, I would say. And that's how much it changed in that amount of time. And I don't think I was hitting it any shorter. It was just everybody else was hitting it longer. The younger guys, the guys that grew up in the weight room and things like that, with all the great coaching there is today, maximizing everything. But yeah, I mean, I think most of the time on the Corn Ferry Tour, the par fives are still in a range where I can hit a long iron to, I'll carry a 7 wood, which I call my favorite club. I think I can still get to some par fives with most par fives with those. But when I was back on tour in 19, 20, and 21, like, I noticed, like, I was more into hitting 3 woods into them where they'd lengthen the course a little bit, and maybe I'd lost a little bit of speed by that time. But, that makes me think, hey, I need to look more at my wedge game. I need to be more of a, David Tom's kind of thought process. Like, if I can't get there, or if I say I'm 270 or 280, and, it's just not the percentage play, like, let's lay it up to the number, and let's lean on another part of our game that, can get me to where I need to be as well. So practicing that a lot more, being more, less balls with longer clubs. And I mean, how many 6 irons are we going to hit in a round? Like, no reason to do that. And just kind of go out there and really dial in your wedges.
Absolutely. I think that that's a perfect segue. We've talked a little bit about your time playing, all that kind of stuff. And we've talked about, adjusting to the travel. One of the things we haven't talked about is preparing for golf tournaments. So tell us a little bit about how you prepare for a golf tournament now and how you used to prepare for golf tournaments, and if there's any difference between that.
Yeah, I mean, I think in the past, like, you first get out on tour, you're seeing courses, they have Monday pro-ams, they're kind of recruiting guys to play in. and you get paid a little bit for that. So it's like enticing, and you're like, oh, I'm going to play that, and then you play on Tuesday, and then maybe you're in the pro am on Wednesday. So you got to cut that back a little bit. Whereas now I'm typically in the pro ams Wednesday, and there are 9 holes most of the time now, and I might play the other 9 on Tuesday. But really know like what I need to work on for that course going in. Like I'm headed to Savannah next week and played there a couple times now, and know that around the greens is pretty tight lies. You're going to do a lot of pitching and chipping. So actually chip some here out at the UK facility, even off the green or off the artificial green inside, to kind of try to mimic those lies a little bit, and just kind of have a outlook to what's coming instead of just always practicing the same, no matter where you're going. Down in Bogota a few weeks ago, we played 2 courses, and our good friend Jacob Cook was down there caddying for me, and he wasn't feeling very good when we got there, so I was kind of on my own. So I didn't play. I played the pro am on Wednesday, 18 holes, but Monday and Tuesday, I just took a wedge and a few balls and a putter and walked around the 2 different courses and hit some chips and putts and kind of just got the feel for that. And that number one focused me in, on some stuff around the greens, and number 2, saved a lot of energy from playing all those holes.
Yeah, I mean, so it sounds like you kind of, at this point in your career, you've kind of like cut out all the fluff, is what I say, in preparation. You kind of, you know what is going to work, and you're just going to only going to spend your energy on that stuff that actually works. So, like, would you say you see players on tour right now that are maybe just practicing a lot all day just because they feel anxious about getting ready for the tournament? Or did you feel like that earlier in your career?
Oh, for sure. And I mean, there's still times now when I think I do. You gave me a great compliment thinking that I do that all the time. But I mean, I kind of was forced to do that with Jacob being sick. But, I learned something from it, knowing that, hey, maybe less is more times than not. But there are times when it's not going well, you're not hitting it like you want. Like you got to get out there and you got to get after it, and kind of knowing that balance. I think over my career, I've probably played well on Thursday, Friday, and then, over the weekend, maybe kind of fanned out a little bit. So trying to be stronger toward the end of my rounds and into my weeks, which I think in 13 I was probably a lot better at that, and that's probably the best year I had.
You mentioned 2013 right there. I think one of the things that, at least by my stats that I got right here, is we haven't talked about majors at all, and you've not missed a cut in a major, I believe is a correct stat. So tell us a little bit about your time at the majors and what you learned playing in them.
Yeah, so in 13, I kind of qualified for them in reverse order. With my second and sixth place finish on the West Coast, that got me into PGA Championship, which was, in July or August at that time. And then they used to have a 36 hole 1 day qualifier in Texas for the Open Championship, and I won that qualifier that year. So I got into that one, and then qualified up in Columbus for the U.S. Open. And 3 great venues: Marion, Muirfield in Scotland, and then Oak Hill, Rochester. And those courses are just so demanding, rough. Marion was a little tricky. They moved some fairways close to some roads, and the angles looked a little funny from the tees. But I was, like you said, fortunate enough to get the job done, to play 4 rounds at all 3 of them. And I haven't been back to one since. So actually just signed up last night to try to get out there to LACC in June.
Hopefully you can get through that qualifier and make it 4 for 4 in the cuts made in your major career. It'd be pretty cool.
Yeah, I just need to knock off one more major,
Getting the yeah, I think
I
we
need
all
to get in that fourth.
think we all know what that one is. But what was the feel like at those major championships compared to even just, a bigger tour event?
Yeah, I mean, I like to think of like Torrey Pines as like the first event of a calendar year. Like you show up there and Tiger would play, Phil would play, all the big names would be there, Dustin, Jason Day, whatever. And you're all in one property, whereas before that, you know, Hawaii, not many big names would play, and then you're spread out in the desert. But it kind of has that same feel to an extent as Torrey, but it's just probably double magnified. Just players, they have all their coaches and everybody that may be part of their team there, and fans are out there practice rounds like no other tournaments, and just attention to detail to try to save all the shots you can in those tournaments. It's like being at the Super Bowl, I'd say, if you're a football player.
We've talked a lot about before the tournament, getting prepared for it. We've talked a lot about the pressure of a tournament. But what we haven't talked about is, you wrap up the tournament and then what? How do you view tournaments besides just looking at the score and saying, hey, I played, my score was good, my score was bad? How do you view tournaments afterwards, and how do you take things from that to learn going into your next events and going into the rest of your season?
Yeah, I think I would say I probably haven't been the best at that in my career, but I'm getting better. And this year, I've kind of made a focus more of a focus on, looking over a tournament after the week's over. I feel like it's easy to just, play around, go eat lunch and be like, oh, I need to chip better. So you'll go chip. But I think it's better to like remove yourself for a day or so, kind of think it over, make some notes, and then you can really get a plan and you can work on that plan. Like, let's give ourselves a 3 or 4 tournament, stretch to really like focus on one part of your game or one thing you want to try to change. And don't be don't take that snapshot of 1 or 2 rounds that you say you miss a cut and you got 2 rounds to look at and you're like, I was really trying to work on my mental game or my wedge play and I was bad those 2 rounds, so I'm going to jump ship and do something different. I think the best are really consistent in doing what they do. They do the same drills. They maybe have a handful of different like games that test them, like say on the putting green or whatever it may be, and they get out of there. They may go hang with their family, or they may go, watch a movie or do something different, read a book. But I think I need to be better. And as we know, it took me 7 years, so I'm maybe not the fastest learner, but here in year 21, maybe we can make some great progress in that.
I think it's just a testament to how hard you've worked over the course of your career. And most people would have given up at that point, but you stuck through it, and it was definitely worth it. You mentioned working on the mental game earlier. I'm curious, have you worked with any mental coaches over the course of your career?
I have. I've worked with Bob Rotella, maybe the main man in the industry that kind of started it. And then I've also worked with Brett McCabe as well, probably quite a bit over the last 4 or 5 years. Haven't talked to him much recently, but he's there if I need to holler at him. Both great guys, and just make you realize that like we're not perfect. Play the game that's in front of you. Try to put I like to think of it as a puzzle. Trying to put the pieces together each day to bring the picture to life, and let's just see what the picture is.
Absolutely. Each of those guys has their different approach to the mental game in part. What is one thing that you've learned from each of them as far as the mental game?
I think Rotella is just basically his books of like golf's not a game of perfect. Like that's what you need to know. If you're stepping out there trying to be a perfectionist, you're gonna have a hard day and it's not gonna be fun. And then McCabe, he's testing you. He's giving you drills. He's trying to build a mindset that like I'm gonna, and there's nothing's gonna stop me. Like I'm gonna do this putting drill on my off weeks. That's very difficult, but I may not even complete the drill when I'm trying to do it, but I'm gonna work on it for an hour and a half or 2 hours. And at the end, I can tell you, hey, I just made 400 putts from 4 to 8 feet. So that's positive to move in and know that, hey, when I have those putts in the tournament next week, we're going to be ready.
I get that. Well, that's perfect. We appreciate you taking the time to join us. The last question we ask every golfer is, if you could go back and talk to yourself as a junior golfer and tell yourself just one thing, what would that one thing be?
Man, great question. Start earlier. Don't be so hard headed and not like the game at age 8 or 10. And, you know, I've got 2 kids now, 8 and 5, and it's probably their fourth or fifth favorite sport, but they have some clubs and they'll get out there. And when they do get out there, they have a blast with it. Just a game that can change your life forever, not even as a professional golfer, but just in general. And have fun with it each day. Don't beat yourself up.
That's the truth. We both have experienced that. Golf for better, for worse, and almost all the time for better, helps you learn something about yourself and figure things out. So we really appreciate that. As far as people finding you on social media, where can they find you if they want to learn more about you, reach out to you, any of that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I'm on Twitter, probably where I'm most active, at JTeater12, JTeater12. That's my baseball number, so I'm still keeping a hold of that baseball a little bit. And then same handle on Instagram. Trying to get a little bit more in on that. That's where the kids like to hang out these days. But those are the main two I have.
Perfect. Well, be sure to give Josh a follow. And then if you're listening to us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, please subscribe and leave a rating. And if you're listening on YouTube, please like and subscribe. This helps us get our message out to more people. And if you're trying to find us on social media, you can find us on Instagram at The Tournament Code and on Twitter at Tournament Code. As always, we appreciate you joining us and look forward to diving in deeper to what it takes to play elite tournament golf.